Everybody, back, and I'm really excited to share this theory I've been working on for a couple years with you as to why centrist Democrats cannot win. It's actually reimagining the political spectrum entirely. And I've been workshopping this for a couple years. Full disclosure, I generally don't like doing these types of live videos and whatnot. And I think this information is so valuable. It's been really valuable for me. It's got a lot of practical uses, and it's really helped me to understand why people align with specific candidates and how to talk to them, how people think. And if I understand how they think, it can help me to better understand how to communicate with them, or whether or not that's going to be a waste of time. Anyways, this is what I call the political paradigm spectrum. And it started, just to give you a little backstory on this, it started back in 2015 when, sort of became all in for Bernie Sanders. I think it was like April or May 2015. And I realized that Bernie was the realization of our Occupy goals, and I was really excited about it. So I decided to go to all of my far lefty friends and try to get them on board, because this is the candidate would give us the best chance at stopping fossil fuels, stopping wars, especially the anti-war pro-peace candidate, anti-war pro-peace communities. And one of the things that I found was that with some of them, to me that was just was a no-brainer. For some reason, they just wouldn't come on board. And a lot of these people were people I met through an initiative we had done with Christina Tobin called Free and Equal. And she created this initiative to get 30-party candidates into the presidential debates. She had moderated one of the debates, I think. And she did this really cool concert called Free and Equal, and there were members of Wu-Tang, and it was all the far lefty people. But I came onto this theory when I was thinking about why my friends wouldn't come on board Bernie Sanders. It didn't make sense to me. And then I was thinking back to this for where I met them. This is where I met Lee Camp and Jill Stein, and at this event, one of the things that I never could get over is that it was like, sort of like far left, radical left. And then there was like Gary Johnson, and there were libertarians. And to me, that never really made any sense. Like, I'm like, why are the libertarians there? And so what it led me to was this. Oh, and if you are just tuning in, this is all part of a series that we're releasing called Be the Revolution, by betherevolution.us. If you sign up, it's a training series, and it's to help us get better faster at grassroots political organizing. I've interviewed some people who I really feel I really respect their work, and people I look up to, people that I've had a chance to organize with, or just people who I think are really up to big things, and people who I respect how they're showing up and the difference they're making. So you can go to betherevolution.us. February 29th, we are going to be having a Badass Women of the Resistance 2-day online summit, and just show you some of the people here. Badass Women of the Resistance, fierce women who challenge the status quo and are changing the world. February 29th, Sunday, March 1st. It's free. All of it's free. This is so much work, but personally, because of the stakes are so high right now with this election, with climate organizing, with the rise of the radical right, the alt-right, I just think it's so important right now. And you see some of the speakers: Jody Evans, Lisa Fithian, Carrie Evelyn Harris, Tracy Corder from Center for Popular Democracy, Miki Konst. That's just a few. I'll show you some of the full lineup. It's pretty badass.
Hi, we're in Los Angeles.
Nope, we don't need that. But just to show you some of the names, we got Mernalini from the Women's March, and Rachel Carmona, Joy Braun, one of the greatest pipeline fighters alive, R.L. Miller, Climate Hawks, Margaret Klein Solomon from the Climate Mobilization. We have a tapping seminar for trauma. Vien, who is with Dreamcorn, Van Jones. So there's going to be more coming, but I'd really recommend you check that out. As well as if you go now, there's also this training called Be the Revolution, how to create vision, strategies, and solidarity for sustainable social movements. And this is still available. No, sorry, Joe, you gotta stop. But yeah, again, some of the same speakers, but we also have Bill McKibben, Josh Fox, Charles Lenchner, David Braun. Yeah, again, this is Lisa Fithian, one of my favorites. Tom Hartman, and Rachel Moss and Daniel Moss and Michelle Garrison from We and Goliath. They're also sharing some marketing tips.
Hi, we're in Los Angeles.
So anyways, that is pretty exciting. We're up to, but back to the training, back to this here. So anyways, what it came to help me understand was that the current understanding of the political spectrum is wrong. It's wrong. And if you're out there, just give me a shout. If maybe say hi, or let us know if you're there. If you have any questions, you can post them in the comments, and I'll see if I can answer them. Please also share this. I personally think this is super valuable. It has saved me a lot of time with not arguing with people that I can't really change their minds or help. There's not an openingness. But to start off with. This is basically what the current understanding is of the political spectrum. They think it's a straight line. We got your, this is the left, this is the center, this is the right. So what you see about what you notice about this is like you diverge out ever more extreme left and right. And there's no way for these they just ever diverge. There's no way for these to ever be unified. And then here's the middle, right? And so, they might put Hillary Clinton more near the center. They might put Bernie more towards the right, something like that. And conversely, you might have your, on the right, you might have your, your Donald Trump is more towards the right here. Might have your, W. You might put more towards the center right. So that's what most people, I think, the current understanding is mostly. Now, what's the premise here? The premise is we need someone like Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden. So the idea is, well, we need to get more Republican votes or moderate votes or center. We need to win the center, right? So the idea is like, based on this model, here's Bernie Sanders to the left. Here's Joe Biden. He's like a centrist. So he is going to appeal to more of these people. That's the idea, I think. And Bernie Sanders is more on the, fringe left, and so we need to win the center. That's the narrative. And this is, in my opinion, is very bad, very, very bad premise. It's based on some very bad sets of assumptions, because this is the picture I think most people have in their mind. Here's Bernie Sanders, and then, it's just he's appealing only to the people far on the left, even though Bernie Sanders actually, in truth, if we're in Europe, like Bernie Sanders is basically moderate. He's an FDR Democrat. He's not radical. He's not really radical. He's basically just advocating for a strong social safety net. I mean, he's an FDR Democrat. So this is what I came to. The question about the libertarians is really what got me. Like, where do the libertarians because they align with the right on guns, and on the left they connect with the left on marijuana legalization, on anti-war, on that. But where they fit in. So what I did is this is what I ended up coming to. It's not a straight line at all. It isn't a straight line at all. And some really cool patterns sort of emerged. And if you're out there, give us let us know if you're watching, let us know if you're interested, or if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. So, okay. So here's this spectrum. Let's just say that the blue represents your Democrats, red for Republicans, makes sense, right? Independents, what they would consider to be independents. So if you understand it in this way, what actually unites the left and the right is that you have to bend this down, and it creates a spectrum. And actually, in truth, what happens is the libertarians align with the far left and the far right. They actually are the bridge between these two. So if we go back to this model, you might put let's put our Joe Biden here. Let's put our Joe Biden here. And a couple really cool patterns emerge here, right? So, and so, again, this idea is that we're going to win. You remember Ken Bone? Do you remember when everyone was like trying to win, like everyone's like, Ken Bone, he's like the undecided voter, he was like a unicorn. He actually was not undecided. This was part of that narrative to sort of keep this idea going. But we're just going to put him here so that he can represent this mythical undecided voter, right? He's the guy. This was actually really a strategy that was more in play in the 90s during the third wave Democrats, like Bill Clinton, who were basically turning into Republicans. And in the 90s, before social media, before the left-right corporate media drove. Like what happened is the political parties weren't actually in principle so different, but because of these algorithms, we have gone in such diverging directions that the difference between the two parties is an ideology. Is like they basically both live in separate worlds. So anyway, so you have your Joe Biden here. And a couple interesting patterns emerge out of here, right? On this spectrum, what I would suggest is that this doesn't reflect left and right, but when you look at it in this way, it reflects status quo versus populism. And this is really, really important. It also reflects the mindset of the people who are voting as well, right? So you have your Joe Biden here, and as you go down in each direction, if you go down this way, the further you go in this direction, the mindset is going to become more extreme, radical. And there's nothing wrong with radical. Radical actually just means to get to the root. You think of radish, right? Radish is a root vegetable. Radical just means to get to the root. Even though that word has been sort of demonized. But we'll just say you're getting more radical, and to some extent, you're actually getting to be more extreme in the mindset. It means their minds are fixed. And the more you travel in this direction, the voter or the person is going to have less, their mind is going to be not as fixed, right? Their ideas, their ideology, they're more, they don't have a definite set of ideologies or understandings that they are going based on. So as you go up this place, this would be more of the moderate Democrats, moderate Republicans, right? So if you go on the, if you're looking on the left, right, I would put Elizabeth Warren somewhere here, maybe, right? Hopefully they stay. Bernie Sanders pretty much rides this level right here. Okay, maybe put Bernie right there. You got your Hillary Clintons and your Joe Bidens, right? Now, if you think about it, if you go back to 2016, when you thought about your candidates like Jeb Bush, for instance, right? You had your Jeb Bushes. Jeb would be like we'd probably put Jeb somewhere around here, right? So if you think about it, the reason why Jeb and Hillary, those types of voters seem to be the same is because along this line, anywhere along here, you're going to find there's going to be a really interesting sort of yin-yang effect. There's going to be it's going to be to some level simpatico. Now, let's just say that they're not entirely the same, but ultimately you're going to find even between neoliberalism and neoconservatism, they're not that different, which is why you have people like Ellen DeGeneres and George Bush. They hang out because they can vibe together like that. You know, you have Barack Obama, George Bush, Bill Clinton. They all vibe because they're sort of on the same wavelength. And again, if you're around here, you're not gonna actually think there's a big deal about that. Now, if you're somewhere down here, to us, this is bananas. Like, we can't even process this because George Bush is a war criminal. Like, why is Ellen DeGeneres hanging out with a war criminal and she's having a pretty good time, right? That's because people who are down here, progressives and down to the radical right, think very differently, right? So the mindset is very, very different. So anyways, moving on. So you got Hillary Clinton here, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. You think that they're that close? They're not. They're not that close. You know, maybe Bernie appeals a little bit more, but they're not that close. But just for pause, and then you have your see, the thing about the 2008 election is that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were actually, they were not very far apart ideologically, right? So even though that was also a highly contested election, the difference ideologically between Hillary and Obama was not, there wasn't much difference between them. Between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, however, there was a huge gap in terms of ideology. This is really important to understand because no one could understand, well, why didn't those voters just come over? Like, why didn't they just come over? The point is there's a huge divide here. Now, if you keep going, like, you're going to have your, you know, also your Cory Bookers are going to be somewhere in here, right? Now, if you keep following down, here is your Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is going to be a little farther to the left, right? You're also going to find your, you know, like, here's your, you know, Crystal Ball, for instance. Crystal Ball is going to vibe. So Crystal is about, so because she falls here, Crystal is down with Tulsi and down with Bernie, right? But not so much with Warren. Not so much with Warren. There's some really interesting patterns that emerge based on this. So if you're seeing, there's a difference. As you're moving down, this becomes more radical in the thinking. Now, this is really important to understand because these voters are going to be based more on intellect. These voters are going to be based more in emotion. Okay, so the emotion is going to be more important for these voters. Like for Bernie, he was always going to win all of the progressives, right? Because progressives down here in this area care about facts. They care about policies. They're high information voters. Like progressives are high information voters. Mainstream, centrists, moderates in general, this isn't for everybody, but in general, mainstream, moderate, supporting Democrats, people who just the vote blue no matter who crowd, tend to be lower information voters. They're not going to be as acquainted with, Barack Obama's record on drones, on NSA spying, on on Wall Street, on him deporting 3 million undocumented citizens. They just, mostly they want to live their lives. And, the idea is I show up to the polls every 4 years. I vote for a Democrat and I'm on the side of the good guys, right? That's these voters. They're not going to care that they're not going to care as much about Bernie's record. They're going to say things like, well, he seems really angry, right? They're more driven by emotion, less driven by facts, less driven by policies, and much more in a group think. This is also why they're a lot easier to control, a lot easier to, I'll say, influence. They're more susceptible to these tropes, like I think when I think Hillary suggested that Bernie was a shill of the gun manufacturers, even though he has a D- record. That drives progressives nuts because we know he has a D- record. It also drives us nuts because we knew that Hillary Clinton was brokering $19 billion in commercial weapon sales to the Saudis in return for Clinton, tens of millions of dollars in donations to the Clintons. Now, that stuff drives us nuts. But to the mainstream Democrats, it's not as big a deal because they're much more about party unity, and they're not as inclined to spend time doing the research. So if you move a little further down, you have your Democrats. It's weird. So here's your blue, here's your red, and then your green for your Green Party. And what I think is so cool about this is that there's a lot of things that kind of match up intuitively, right? This is your Green Party, right? Moving more to the radical left. You keep moving down further, you're going to have, this is, somewhere in this is you're going to have your, this is kind of your Occupy Wall Street. Now, it doesn't mean that you might be Occupy and you might be anywhere on this spectrum, right? You might be anywhere on the spectrum here, right? But generally speaking, this is going to be the wheelhouse it's going to align with. Now, another cool thing emerges in that. So you have Occupy over here. What else did you have during that time? You had your, let's see. So just as you had your Hillary, Jeb Bush over here, Occupy, and you have your Tea Party, right? So yeah, and they both came up at the same time. So this really interesting sort of like yin-yang effect happening here, which I think is kind of cool. So you have your Occupy, your Tea Party, right? It's like it's weird. It's sort of like, I know the only way I can describe it is like yin-yang. It's like there's Yoda and Darth Vader, right? Here, even more extreme, you have your Antifa, and you have these dickheads, the Proud Boys. But there's sort of again, it's like a yin-yang effect. Who else do we have? Yeah, and we have our Mayo Pete is us out here with also Evil Morty. This is kind of getting to why won't get elected, right? That's kind of the premise we're working with here. So here we have our Mayo Pete. I'm gonna put him up here with Clinton. Now these voters, again, they care more about heart centers, so they're going to be more susceptible to rhetoric that doesn't really say anything, doesn't make a promise. It just makes them feel good, you know, like Joe Biden. Like, this rhetoric is like, we're America, we're the greatest country in the world. Well, like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? What does it mean that we're the greatest country in the world? It's just rhetoric. It doesn't mean anything, right? But these voters are going to like that because it's going to make them feel good. They're not going to want to do a deep dive into his record on mass incarceration. And, you know, you're going to get a lot of cognitive dissonance here because if you try to bring that up, they're going to feel uncomfortable because they don't like to think of themselves as supporting those you know, kind of evil things. But in principle, when you support these candidates, you do. You're supporting what they support. But again, these are going to be lower information. These are going to be lower information voters, right? And if you see Warren here, she's supporting. It makes perfect sense to me that Ayanna Pressley would support Elizabeth Warren, right? She also, though, however, still aligns with AOC and the squad, right? So she's still gonna vibe with. Oh, here's Jeff. Put Jeff up here. Like you're gonna have your squad is gonna be, you know, somewhere around here. AOC's now AOC can hang with Ayanna Pressley as part of the squad because they sort of occupy this part of the spectrum. Ayanna Pressley also came for Hillary Clinton because basically this is where the rubber meets the road. You can really mostly talk to people who are just on your immediate left or immediate right. What I do think is cool about this idea is that in the outdated model of the left-right spectrum, there is never going to be any kind of thing that unifies us, right? You just move farther out to the right or you move farther out to the left. These two are always divided. It's political football. No chance for unity. But here you understand that it's actually everybody is holding hands. Everybody's holding hands in a circle. Only the person to your immediate left and immediate right are the ones you're most likely to identify with and talk to. If once you get one more to the right, it's sort of like if you were holding hands with someone to your left and right, but it would be hard for you to talk over them to the person on the other side, right? You sort of need this person to translate, right? So it's interesting because we actually all need each other. We all need to be connected. Another kind of cool thing emerges. All right, this is another point. Why is it important? Why is the Joe Rogan endorsement important? Now, everybody keeps saying like Joe Rogan is a right-wing guy. He's not. He's actually not a right-wing guy, right? Yeah, I would definitely put him, though, on this sort of anarcho, far-left, libertarian line, right? I put him on this like anarcho, far-left libertarian. So your anarchists, this is really like your anarchists. Also Antifa, when the conservatives say like Antifa is a tool of the Democrats, it's ludicrous because Antifa, if you're down with Antifa, most likely you are not down with the Democratic Party at all, or any party. And that's another point. This is going to represent more above this line here. You're looking at, this is status quo. Okay, this is status quo. You really don't want things to change that much, but as the further you move down to either side here below this axis, this is populism. Populism. All right? You're moving down here. This is much more towards individual liberty, right? Individual liberty, anti-establishment. So the further down the spectrum you move is anti-establishment. This is also kind of cool you know, if you look at the libertarians down here, why is the libertarian flag yellow? It's interesting. Like, I think that it's just something that happens intuitively. This is the libertarian. Don't tread on me. No step on snake. I think this is so interesting because if you look at the libertarian ideology, it's almost schizophrenic. It's like abolish the government. But then again, they really align on us with individual liberties in terms of being free to do what you want. They're okay with abortion, for instance, right? On the left leaning. Now, even within libertarians, you have there are a lot of differences on the right leaning libertarians and the left leaning libertarians, right? So you have on the right, you have your Bundy Ranch people, right? These are your right-leaning libertarians. On your left, you have, have like Vermin Supreme. Vermin Supreme is he's on the libertarian ticket. He's like your lefty libertarian, anti-war. He's all about anti-war. Even though he claims to be a friendly fascist, it's all about being anti-war. And just like we have the yellow libertarians, I don't know, it's just kind of funny to me that where we would put Donald Trump is on the orange. Donald Trump is orange. I don't know. I just love it. For some reason, I love it. So one of the things that you got to look at too is why across this line there is like this weird. It's like parody. These two, there's going to be something that's going to vibe. It's like a similar vibration. Now, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders could not be more diametrically opposed in every way ideologically. But you're going to see there's a lot of similarities in the types of movement they attract. Now, now these are populist candidates. This is super important because in times of massive inequality, which is now, you have populism. Populism tends to take one of two routes. Either you're going to go, populism means blaming someone. Populists are going to blame someone for society's ills, right? So during World War II, you had FDR and you had Hitler. So it generally goes one of two ways. Either you're going to be blaming the super wealthy, which is accurate, for rigging the game, or you're going to scapegoat immigrants, which is what Donald Trump is doing. So Donald Trump gained popular. So basically, in times of massive inequality that we saw post-Depression, for instance, after the Depression is when FDR came. And FDR offered the New Deal, which was about investing in infrastructure, creating jobs, stimulated the economy. This is Bernie Sanders. Donald Trump went the Hitler route, scapegoat immigrants. Now, it doesn't matter that it doesn't matter actually that more undocumented immigrants are actually leaving the country than coming in. It doesn't matter. It doesn't exist in reality as much. But he was able to game this. He's not a real populist, but he ran on a populist platform. Now, this is super important because ultimately, this old idea that this centrist is going to capture this voter, this doesn't really exist anymore. And this, what you'd say, the independents aren't just this little slice as you would think here. This is where they would traditionally put independents. Independent could be anywhere on the spectrum. It just means that I don't align with one of the major parties. But in a sense, these voters here are not, this is actually the majority. Down here, this is the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans are one car accident away, one health risk away from being bankrupt. The majority of Americans have less than $1,000 in the day. And at the end of the day, what's happened is most people they've just kind of given up. They've just kind of given up. And so it's really important to understand that these candidates are never going to win these candidates. These are not going to come on board. So ultimately what we have is these candidates, the vote blue no matter who, these are party loyalists. This is going to represent roughly Democrat. I think Democrats are about 30% of the electorate, 32% of the electorate. Of those 32% of the registered Democrats, only a small portion are actually vote blue no matter who party loyalist Democrats. There isn't enough of them to win. Now, here's the thing that's really critical. This is where the rubber meets the road. The party loyalists will vote blue no matter who. All they care about is that they get rid of Orange Hitler. That's all they care about. All they care about is Democrat wins, and if a Democrat wins, then the good guys come in, right? What that means is in the general election, you already have these voters. These voters will vote for Democrat. They're going to show up and vote for anyone that's not Trump. It follows, but these voters won't. These voters won't, because they're not going to be able to palate. They're high information. They can't stomach the notion of someone like Hillary or Biden or Buttigieg continuing these useless wars. Obama expanded the war theater to 7 countries. He dropped more bombs than George Bush, right? So these voters are not going to fall in line. So it follows you need them. There aren't enough party loyalists to win. You need these voters. So it follows if you know that they're not going to fall in line. Bernie Sanders cannot command this voting base because they tend to be more anarchic in their mindset, more individualistic. It's also what makes it harder to organize. These voters here, Republicans and mainstream Democrats, much easier to organize because they're much more used to being in a group. They're okay with that. We tend to be much more individualistic. We tend to be much more. The more you get down to this level, the more individualistic you become. So this is why it's important that that Bernie Sanders. This is another reason that actually the Rogan vote is really important, is because this voting bloc is not going to come on board for any one of these other candidates. Really crucial, except for Tulsi Gabbard. This is another reason that actually Tulsi Gabbard is the most overlooked candidate for VP, in my opinion. And the reason is because these libertarians are actually going to be 3 to 5% in a lot of those battleground states. Even Bernie Sanders is generally not going to get as many. Tulsi Gabbard is absolutely beloved by the libertarians because of her anti-war stance. That doesn't mean they're the same. Doesn't mean that Tulsi's a libertarian. This drives people crazy. She's not a libertarian. She's actually to the left. She's actually to the left of Bernie on these issues. Now, another point about the libertarians. One of the things that's interesting, I want to get back to that kind of simpatico thing. Joe Rogan doesn't mean that he. Now, again, I'm not apologizing for all of the things that Joe Rogan said. I'm not saying I agree with Joe Rogan. I'm just giving you a demonstration of where he falls on the spectrum and his mindset. But you notice a lot of the people he has on are these Proud Boy jerks, right? He's had given Gavin McInnes on and Jordan Peterson and all these. Jordan Peterson's not a Proud Boy, but he's in that like. So over here you have, this is the alt-right. Here's your alt-light, right? So Joe is going to kind of vibe, maybe he's a little bit further north. But the point is that he's going to vibe. He can talk to them. There's a sort of a resonant frequency that they can communicate on. This is really crucial, though. The Rogan vote's really crucial because if Rogan's going to come on board, that means Bernie is going to be able to swing a huge swath of voters that is not going to go to any one of these candidates. So we need to let go of this idea. This is a bad idea. It's based on a very false premise that a centrist can somehow win the independent vote, right? this is also like Joe Rogan and we'll say even maybe more the Alex Jones. So we have our Alex Jones wearing his tinfoil hat. Like, they were friends. They don't agree. Like, I don't know if you saw Alex Jones actually went to war with Joe Rogan because Jesus told him to go to war with him. Apparently, that was the thing, right? So, anyways, just getting back to the libertarians. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, so just to recap, you have your moderate. These people don't have as much of a belief about, their minds aren't really made up. They're not really into the game as much, right? But this is less and less and less. This was much more a factor in the 90s when the political ideologies and parties were not too far apart. Now they live in different universes. So these voters largely don't exist. It really, in 2020, is going to come down to which side gets out of bed. Which side is going to get mobilized and energized? And traditionally, like Barack Obama ran as a progressive. He mobilized, got people excited about issues. He stood on an anti-war platform. Wasn't serious, but he stood on that platform. That is a thing that got a lot of voters excited. Hillary Clinton ran on "I'm not Trump." She didn't make any promises about anything. This was about weaponized identity politics, and there was no issue to get voters excited, right? And even if she did make that, we know based on where she falls that most likely they're not gonna stay true to that. So this is really important. Also understanding that this is also why there can be, this also explains why Chuck Schumer had this idiotic idea of that we're going to win for every, what do you say? For every blue collar vote we lose, we're going to pick up a moderate Republican in Philadelphia or something. For every, I can't remember what it was, but the point is, like, Chuck Schumer actually talked about a Republican strategy. Like, the Hillary Clinton campaign was actually going for these moderate Republicans, but that's because they think kind of alike. Now, unfortunately, that just isn't possible in a populist race. Maybe if the economy was booming, and maybe I don't know if there's a scenario that would happen, but if everything was fine, maybe that would work. But because the income inequality levels have gotten so absurdly ridiculous and people are suffering so much, this is a populist race. A populist is going to win in 2020. Either a fake populist is going to win in Donald Trump, or a real populist is going to win in Bernie Sanders. And in my view, Bernie is the only one that can win. And I hope this sort of explains why. Just to make one other point, want to get back to just talking to the libertarians just to illustrate the point. So just to recap, you have your state sort of party loyalists, statists. As you move down, you're getting more and more progressive, more and more radically minded. That means that these people are less open-minded. They're not going to vote blue no matter who. It's not going to happen. So you need to let that go. So it follows that as you keep moving down, they're not just going to come on board because you go into East Cleveland with Jay-Z. That's what Clinton understood. So as you keep moving down, you're getting more and more, and you do get more extreme. One of the reasons that this is also important is because if you see somebody is kind of vibing in this area, number one, you can know that going through and listing off points in their record and data, it's not going to have as much of an effect here. It's not going to have as much of an effect here. They're going to be more moved by emotions, So you could talk about the fact that Barack Obama energized voters by giving them actual policy platforms. And you can talk about how Obama ran on a progressive platform. Gore, Kerry, Clinton, these people all lost because they were boring centrists. So energy, enthusiasm point to the fact that Bernie's got the biggest crowd sizes. He's drawing tens of thousands of people. It's just like 45. They're both filling stadiums. This is really important. Go to a Joe Biden rally or a Buttigieg rally. It's like 500 people. Clinton rallies, 500 people. Like, what were we even talking about? What are we thinking? So it's time to let go of this spectrum, and it's time, in my view, to understand this. The last thing I want to point out, which is kind of cool, is that there's more to the story, in my opinion, is that actually not only does this reflect populist versus status quo, and this is your sort of left-right bias, but if the more this actually also represents power. So what do you have at the central? Central banks. What's in the middle of everything? Who's really controlling everything? It's the central banks. So when you say centrist, it's actually not out there as much as it's here. And when you take this spectrum and you take this wheel and you draw a circle here, you're going to find that the people who are in power, as you move towards the center, this is more power. That's why you have things like, and again, it drives a lot of us crazy, but that's why, Bernie is here ideologically, but that's why he can say, he'll say things like, these people all work together in centralized power. This, however, is they're terrified of Bernie. These people are terrified of Bernie because he is the whole goal for this whole system to stay intact. The centrists want you to stay in this paradigm. They want you to be in left versus right. It's political football. Democrats good, Republicans bad. And on the other side, Republicans want you to think the Democrats are bad and they're the good guys, right? Political football, it's the Yankees and the Red Sox, and there's no unity. But if you understand it here, this is about populism. This is populism down here, okay? This is populism. So I hope that this was useful. I'm happy. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, and you can support. I guess we launched a Patreon. So if you go to Patreon, Be the Revolution, Patreon/Be the Revolution, and GoFundMe, we're trying to keep the lights on, which is really hard. It's really, really hard to pay your bills and stay dedicated to this work, and to stay organizing. I don't like it. I really don't like it. It's my least favorite thing. I also have work I do on the side that I do to keep the lights moving. So if you like this, if you think this is valuable, please share it. Share the idea. It's time to stop. It's time to let go of this paradigm. So this is my political paradigm spectrum, and I hope you enjoy this. So please share it, and I hope this was useful. Hit me up if you have any questions, and definitely join us. For our Be the Revolution. Be the Revolution. We're going to talk about not just this concept, but we're going to talk about a lot of other concepts that I think are really not just useful, but I think they're actually critical. So just to take you through again, coming up on February 29th, March 1st, Be the Revolution, Badass Women of the Resistance. So these are all some of the most incredible women who are leading our movements. And this is the last thing I want to say. If somebody keeps talking about the Bernie bro narrative, our movement is being led by women, and especially women of color, being led by that. So please encourage people, if they keep talking about Bernie bros, ask them to stop erasing our women leaders, because most of these new movements are led by women, right? So who are our top leaders right now? It's the squad: AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ocasio, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley. Like, this is the face of the Democratic Party. They're the most popular. So please stop erasing our women leaders, especially our women of color. And just remember, like, vote blue no matter who. If you are a vote blue no matter who, I really encourage you to take this in. I know that probably you know, only the progressives are listening to this, which is frustrating. But the vote blue no matter who, it follows that since these voters are not going to come and they're not going to get out of bed, it's not going to happen. And even if a percentage of them do, the larger percentage of them do vote, it's the enthusiasm. These are the people that are going to march in the streets. Even if you look on the right, the Bundys, these are the Bundys actually created an armed revolution. Now you'll also see, again, this is also why you're seeing you also see a lot of white supremacy around this area, especially the right libertarians. These people do not like Black Lives Matter. It tends to be a lot of racism along this vein. And let's also not forget that progressives also are not immune to white supremacy as well. So, but again, this is important because these people won't fall in line. They're more anarchic, but they're also occupied. These are the people that will take to the streets. Like Bill Maher said, the badass motherfuckers of the movement. And we are getting more organized. You know, these concepts are coming. We are getting more organized because we're seeing a concept emerging that everybody is a leader in their own right. And that's going to really vibe with the more, I don't mean anarchist, but anarchic thinking. They're more individualistic, but because of social media, also everybody is a leader now. So you're a leader. Every single person is a leader. So it's time to let go of this old paradigm of falling in line. This is over. A centrist will lose to 45, period. There's only one populist in the race right now that currently is viable. That's Bernie Sanders. He's the front runner. Vote blue no matter who, friends. My recommendation is that it makes sense that if to support the candidate, if these people are telling you who they will and who they will not get out of bed and campaign for, listen to them, because we need all of them. 45 is going to be a lot stronger than people think. We're going to need everybody. Bernie Sanders is going to get this huge swath of voters that are going to be energized. They're going to be making memes. They're going to be marching. They're going to be protesting. They're going to be disrupting. They're going to be very active online. They're going to travel all over the country to different states. These are your most hardcore campaigners. You're going to need that energy and that enthusiasm to get the rest of the country, who has mostly given up on the process because the oligarchs have done such a good job at rigging the game that most people have just given up, right? So I hope this is useful. Sign up for our series at betherevolution.us. Hit me up if you have any other questions. Sorry if this kind of jumped around all over the place. But yeah, so these are some ideas that I'm putting out. I'm also putting this out in the book I'm releasing called the Political Revolutionaries Handbook, which I'm excited to release. And that's telling a lot of the stories from Occupy to 2016 and offering some of these concepts. So I hope this was useful. Signing out, and thanks for hanging with us.